This is the Marketing Podcast Network.
Welcome to Uncorking a Story, the podcast that introduces you to the rich world of storytellers who share their personal journeys, creative processes, and the stories behind their stories, one conversation at a time. I'm your host, Mike Carlin, and I'm thrilled to be part of your writing journey. If you're an aspiring writer, a literary enthusiast, or simply someone who believes in the transformative power of words, you've come to the right place. Every week, we'll pop the cork on the world of successful storytellers and give you a healthy pour of inspiration, insight, and empowerment. My mission is to help writers like you realize your full potential through the transformative and therapeutic power of writing. Whether you're just starting your literary voyage or looking to refine your craft, I'm here to provide you with the knowledge, inspiration, and encouragement you need to embark on your own storytelling adventure. So, are you ready to uncork your story and let your creativity flow? Uncorking a Story is about to begin. Sit back, relax, and let the transformative magic of storytelling whisk you away. Welcome to Uncorking a Story. Well, hey down, and welcome to another exciting episode of Uncorking a Story. I'm Mike Carlin, and today I'm excited to have you with me as we dive into another great story to uncork. Today, I want to remind you to please follow Uncorking a Story on all social media platforms, including Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Our handle is at Uncorking a Story on all of those platforms. And a quick note on YouTube, it's been a great, fantastic growth vehicle for our show. It's also a great way for me to monetize this, but that's another story. And it's a fun way for me to interact with the audience because it is really one of the only platforms where I can use to post episodes and actually engage in a dialogue with the audience. You know, whether you want to talk about your reflections on each guest, and we've had some great discussions or conversations on certain guests on YouTube, as well as, you know, you making fun of my bad attempts at humor. You might say things like, Mike, why are you always asking people what their favorite TV show from childhood was? Well, you know, I just can't get enough talk about the Brady Bunch or Little House on the Prairie, which for some reason, those two shows come up all the time. In all honesty, it is a great place for me to engage with the audience. So please continue to engage on YouTube. And of course, subscribe to our channel on YouTube and like, rate, subscribe to Uncorking a Story wherever you get your podcast. Now, today on the show, we have Joan Meyerson, who spent most of her career writing, producing, and directing documentaries before penning her first novel. Her first novel is called Who Needs Paris? Turns out we all need Paris. That's what she says anyway. That's what she says. Jeez. Oh my gosh. Sometimes I wish I had a co-host so I could, so they could make fun of me when I say things like that. But actually my conversation with Joan had me reminiscing about a story from my mid-20s. I was in Paris and I was at a conference repping a startup called Dynamic Logic. And my exit from that venture is actually a lesson in what not to do if you want to become wealthy through a startup. But I'm going to save that story for another time. At the time, though, back in I think this was 1999, my boss, a guy named Nick Nyan, great guy, suggested that we rent motor scooters and drive around the city. Now, if you've ever been to Paris or any European city for that matter, you know that people drive a little bit differently than they do here. It's almost like everybody there is driving like they're from Massachusetts. And I say that with love to all of my Massachusetts listeners, but you know that you guys just are not good drivers. For context, I've never been on a scooter before this trip to Paris. Never. The only thing on two wheels I'd ever been on was my mountain bike. The only thing I really had going for me was that I remembered how to read. I couldn't speak French, but I could read, many words in French. So I could decipher like some of the road signs. Of course, that does not solve for the bad drivers. Anyway, we get the scooters and my boss, Nick, pulls up next to me and he pushes up his visor on his helmet and he says, "Tonight we ride." And I remember that. And I always get a kick out of it. So we did do Paris by motor scooter. I almost died 5 times. But it was a blast. We really did have a good time. And that's when I realized that for the most part, I've lived a very sheltered life. I always played it safe. If I was anywhere on business, I'd never really explore whatever city I was in, preferring to go, either to the office I had to go to the focus group facility where I was running focus groups at, or just someplace close to my hotel. Like I was never, ever going outside of my comfort zone. And you could call me boring, and that would not be inaccurate. I learned, though, through that experience in Paris that I really did need to get pushed out of my comfort zone. And once I did, I had a lot of fun. I will admit that was the one thing I remember of that trip. I don't remember the prospective clients I met. I don't remember much about the dinner I had, except for the creme brulee at the end of the meal. That was fantastic. But I do remember the motor scooters. And it reminds me, though, that as a writer, sometimes, I don't want to speak for you, I will speak for myself. We can get too comfortable in our writing. We write similar plots. We have recognizable characters who have similar flaws. We use the same adjectives. Sometimes we need that push to challenge ourselves, to make our writing better and to grow as writers. That's why feedback from people like agents and editors and beta readers is so valuable. These are not people who are just being critical. They have a vested interest in our success. They have a business. If it's your editor, if it's your writer, your agent, your publisher, they've got a vested interest in your success. They want to see you flourish and grow as a writer. So they tell you, get out of your comfort zone. When they tell you that, listen to them. Now, the only way to grow as a writer is to challenge yourself. And, you need to have more experiences in life, and that's one way to fuel your own creativity. Have more experiences. Maybe fly to Paris, rent a scooter, see the city on two wheels. It was a blast. We had a good time. We also got caught in the rain that time, which was not fun because we were soaking wet. We jumped into this Guinness pub. I think it was actually called the Guinness pub. We befriended, me and my boss were amateur musicians. That's putting it kindly. But we were big music lovers, and we were in this like rock and roll Guinness pub, and we befriended this other music lover, and we had to mime our conversation because he didn't speak English and our French was terrible. But we had a good time. If I ever get Nick on the show, we'll take a little walk down memory lane because that was a very memorable trip. Anyway, my goal on Uncorking Story is always to use this as a platform to help make you a better writer. So that's today's lesson. Get out of that comfort zone of yours. Now, let's uncork Joan Meyerson's story. Joan Meyerson is an award-winning writer, director, and producer of documentaries and television programs for which she won 2 Writers Guild of America awards. The dramatic accounts she wrote about vets and military families reconfirmed her belief that the best stories come from real life, a belief she has followed in writing. Having told the stories of others, she now tells one of her own, inspired by the 2 times she lived in Paris. Joining me today to talk about her career and first novel, Who Needs Paris, is Joan Meyerson. Welcome to Uncorking a Story, Joan.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm happy to have you here, Joan. And tell me, where does your story as an author begin?
Well, I didn't really think of myself as an author. I never really thought about writing, but for some reason, back in elementary school, I think it was about the 5th grade, we were given some kind of a test, IQ test or whatever it was. And a couple of weeks later, I got a notice that I had been picked from my class to go to a special writing class once a week at a neighboring elementary school. That in this one community, there were maybe 10 or 15 elementary schools. And so I went not knowing anything. And at one point, I think it was right after summer vacation, and one of our first assignments was to write something about what we did. What did we do last summer? And I had gone with my family to Mexico. This was a very a sort of a pioneer thing to do back at that time. We just left in a car and drove down Mexico, not knowing where we were going to stop every night in hotels or whatever. But there was this one town, I can't remember the name of it, but that was famous. It was an old town with old architecture and everything on a hill. And it was famous for its cemetery, of all things. And the rumor was that they had mummies there. And so here I am, 11 years old, and my family decides we're going to go see the mummies. And we ended up, I couldn't believe what it was really going to be. I thought maybe we'd be all wrapped up like Egyptians mummies, But we walked down, we start going through this spiraling staircase down below the cemetery. And all of a sudden you see stacks of bodies without not wrapped up at all, but mummies. And it was sort of, I couldn't believe I was seeing such a thing. And it was so bizarre that I just looked. So anyway, guess what what was my writing for my writing assignment, what I did last summer. So I got in front of the class and told them about the mummies, and that was it. I had a great audience. Everyone loved it. And then I thought after that, wow, I guess maybe I could tell a story. So after that, though, I still didn't think about being a writer. But I did know that whenever I saw something important, something that was seemed to be relevant to me, I just had to write it down, and I would write in my journal certain things too about my own personal life. And that went on for a long time, but I still didn't think about being a writer. And I just fell into it because I fell into a lot of things. And that's how I found my life's mission, I guess you might say. But because I did go to college, to Berkeley, graduated, went to Europe for a year, and that's in Paris. That's part of my novel in '64, and really didn't want to come back, but I had already signed up for graduate school in history. I went, and everything seemed so different when I got back to the United States. It just wasn't France. I just, and studying history in graduate school was much more theoretical and mathematical and statistical and all those things I didn't like too much. So I came home for the summer to LA and just looked for a summer job. And before I knew it, I had gotten a job, not knowing anything about it, but as an associate producer on a live TV talk show. And I stayed there for a year and I loved it. But then I was let go because the producer's wife had been the one that had been the associate producer. She had been ill. She came back. So then I went for another job. I had to find another
better. I mean, really. What? I said the nerve of her getting better.
Yes, that's what I thought. But this is part of my philosophy. You never know what's going to happen when that happens, because I could have just stayed at that one place and the local TV station, and I didn't know. But anyway, I had met some people through my boss who were making documentaries. And when I went to the employment agency, they told me about how can I say it? An organization that was very famous for making documentaries, and they had an opening for a secretary. And of course, at that time, the only jobs for women were secretaries. So I said, okay, I'll have the interview, and I got the job. And the man who wanted me to work for him said, they aren't paying for somebody more than a secretary, but I really need you to do other things. And I found myself starting to write for him. And that's sort of how it began, because I fell in love with documentaries. I managed to work my way up, and you write the narration for documentaries, and you have to tell the story. It's not just writing. You find out that telling a story involves images and action and interviews with other people, and you create a story that way. And the more and more that I was making documentaries, the more and more I saw how important stories are coming from real life, being authentic.
When you were an undergraduate at Berkeley, were you studying history, or was your major something else?
I majored in history, but again, I majored in history because the teacher that I had for Western civilization was so interesting. He would tell stories about historic, all the historic people, and he would relate literature to history, and what the different. If you're going through from the year 1 to 19, whatever it was, how society changed, and it was reflected in the novels that you would read, and he would assign those kinds of things for us. And that's what made history interesting. Again, history became interesting because you got to know the people that were involved in history, and not just a president or a dictator, but everybody else.
Yeah,
So that's what.
not
Yeah.
just the facts, but it's the story, right? The story. I mean, it's
Right. There's a
look,
story.
story is actually written in the title, history. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So basically, I just love stories.
yeah.
That's what happened.
When I'm also curious, so it sounds like you were in Paris in 1964.
That's
Um,
right.
what was it like coming back to the U.S. after spending a year in Paris and 1964, 1965? There were some major cultural shifts happening
That's right.
in the United States.
Absolutely.
And coming back to California, I mean, what was that like?
Well, it was weird. It was very weird. After spending a year abroad and sort of feeling like you had become part of that culture, which was different than California culture. Uh, and I felt, I started graduate school, but I felt really sort of distanced from the rest of the people. I felt like I couldn't really communicate with them. I was just had learned to live another kind of life. And that was probably part of why when I did come home for summer vacation and got this other job, I was thrilled because I was meeting all kinds of other people that, from everybody from Ronald Reagan to Phyllis Diller. And I felt like I was broadening my horizons more than if I was just had been in academia.
Yeah. Well, tell me when you join this documentary film company and you got a job as a secretary. When did you get your first break to start? And tell me what that first break was. Was it writing? Was it producing?
Yeah,
Was it what was it?
yeah. Yeah. Well, first of all, the second person, so the first person that hired me, said that he couldn't afford to pay for anything more than a secretary. So I was a secretary, but would you please start writing some things for me, some synopsis of different TV series or something? So I did. And then he was let go. And the next boss that I had also wanted me, was my secretary. I was his secretary. But he was in charge of writing proposals for shows. The name of the company was David Wolper, by the way, and you may know that name from the famous series called Roots that he
Sure.
produced. Yeah, but before that, he was doing all kinds of others. He was the major documentary filmmaker on television at that time. Anyway, so the guy that was my second boss, he wanted me to start writing proposals for new shows. So because he didn't have time to do it, so I did it, and I became sort of known as the princess of writing proposals. They liked my proposals,
The proposal
and
princess. I love it.
yeah. And they sold some shows, because of it. And but it's still they were not giving me the job. And then one of his colleagues was going to produce his first documentary, and it was called Big Cats, Little Cats. They were doing all kinds of shows on animals, and he liked me, and my boss recommended me, and he said, you should hire Joan as your associate producer because she really is good. But the bosses, they were giving these kind of jobs to all the guys who had been following the same path I had been. But they asked me to write a whole proposal, a whole outline of what this documentary could be. Find all the stories, how would it be put together, et cetera, et cetera. So I did that, and then they said, "All right, but Joan, if you take this job, you will no longer have job security. The secretary has job security, but a producer doesn't." And I said, "Okay, I don't care." And anyway, that's how it started. I was associate producer. Then I could become a producer. And finally, the same guy that gave me the job as associate producer asked me to write another proposal for him. And I said, no more proposals until I get to be a producer. And he said, okay, if you write this proposal and I sell the story, you can produce it. And he was good to his word. And that started me.
Yeah, I was going to say, did you get that in writing?
No, I didn't, but it's a good thing he was good. He came through. Yeah. So
Well,
that's it. My life has sort of been like that. Things happen, and you just have to go with it.
yeah. Well, it seems like things happen, but you also have to have talent. You can't completely divorce yourself from that. It sounds like you not only had talent, but also a track record. as well. And it seems like,
Yeah.
it absolutely did work out for you. Obviously, you had a great career in the space. But tell me about Who Needs Paris? What's the what can you share with us about your latest book?
Oh, well, I guess the three words that are important is from Who Needs Paris is we all need Paris. That's what you find out at the end of the book. We all need Paris. But uh, it actually it was inspired, as you say, by the two times that I lived in Paris. At the time, I didn't think of writing a novel. I was first I was in just really finishing college. That was in 1964, and not knowing what I wanted to do. And then by 1977, I had been producing shows and writing and directing them too. And so I really hadn't thought about writing about it, but they were momentous experiences for me. Certain things happened that were just kind of really struck me, and I would write a little bit about them, some journals and notes, and I had letters that I got from people or that I sent to people that I kept in a big box. And every once in a while, I think about writing a story. Mainly, I was thinking about doing the one from the 60s, but it just didn't seem like enough of a story. And nor did the story from the 70s seem like enough of a story. Something was missing, and I wasn't sure what. But so in the meantime, I kept, as I say, producing or writing documentaries, or like I did a lot of things with PBS, like the National Memorial Day concert. And as you said before, when getting involved with that, the more you do those kinds of things, the more you see how important real life is to your stories. And but I did it for a long time, and it became a time when I thought, I've been telling other people's stories. It's maybe time to tell my story, but I wasn't quite sure what to do. As I say, what do I do with the 60s? Do I do the 70s? And then I had the brainstorm, and that was I realized that the two really needed to go together, one without the other, because the one in the 70s, she wouldn't be who she was unless she had gone through, what she had gone through in the 60s. And there was something that needed still to be resolved. And so I realized that that was the crux of this novel that I wanted to write. And so that's what happened. So that's why we go back and forth in time every chapter, because it's like peeling an onion. Layer by layer, we are getting down to the core of what this woman, Kate, is dealing with. And as she grows and sheds some of the stuff that she's been afraid to talk about or afraid to go forward with in her life, we begin to find out what it was that really needs to be attended to, that she needs to deal with. And whether or not she can do it is also the crux of the story. It's not easy. But as she knows, once she finally goes back to Paris, she swears she's never going to go back to Paris after the 60s. She's avoided it like the plague. She doesn't want to go back, but she has this sometime freelance job with a French producer, helping him produce shows in California. And all of a sudden he asks her if she'll come to Paris and help him produce this documentary at the Deauville Film Festival in Paris. I mean, well, it's in Deauville, but the office is in Paris. She doesn't want to go, but she knows that her life's really going nowhere. She's 35 and she hasn't really moved on. And she somehow in the back of her mind thinks maybe this is my last chance, to figure it out. So she goes and discovers a whole other Paris for her, one that's bright and shiny and full of opportunity and much more open to women who are pursuing careers. And so that's sort of what that's really what that's what the story's about, and what happens to her then in the 70s, and also then being able to deal with what in the past.
Yeah, it's almost kind of a mystery, right? The little mysteries unfolding as you're learning more
Yes.
about her. But is it also fair to say it's a sort of a later stage coming of age type story for her?
Oh yes, yes, you're right. Absolutely. I say that it's coming of age at the age of 35. Is
Yeah.
what it is.
I think there's so many of us think of coming of age stories, of teenagers and adolescents, but
Yeah,
hey, you can come of age at any time in your life, and
that's
why
right.
why
That's
not at
right.
35? I love
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
I love it.
I
I'm
mean,
still waiting to come of age.
I'd like to start it all over again. But
I
yeah,
mean,
she really does think about that. That's part of it because she realizes, from her early 20s to her mid 30s, she hasn't done much. She are not more than she wants to do, and if she doesn't do this, she's not never. So when going back to Paris at that time, it really is the time that she comes of age. You're absolutely right.
interesting. Well, I know we can't talk too much more about the book because we don't want to
Okay.
spoil anything
Yeah.
for the Uncorking Story listeners. I'm curious. Um, having you've been to Paris a couple times in your life, do you have a special memory of your own time in Paris? Maybe going back to that first time.
Special memory. Well, I don't know. All the special memories uh, were born from some of my real life stories. So I don't know if I want to go into that
No,
too
well,
much,
I
but
mean,
I think
you can choose not to respond.
but I guess one of the things that our character is, she decides that she wants to learn, the French savoir faire. She wants to learn how to be a French person. That will be her goal, and she gets a job as an au pair. You know what that is, and living with a family and tutoring the children. And she sets out to cut her hair in the style that Gene Seberg and Breathless has, and to wear the clothes. Her American clothes go into the garbage can, and so those are some of the things that happened to me.
All right,
I
very
was determined to become très français.
well, very good, very good. It's one of my. I've been once in my life, and I'd only been there on business. I did fall in love with the city and the people. I thought this was going back to the late 90s, I want to say, or maybe early 2000s. I can't remember. I was working for a startup company, and the owner and I were going to a trade show in Paris, and he is a lot more adventurous than I am. I am not what you might call all that adventurous. I have to be pushed to do things. He had this idea of renting motor scooters and just driving around Paris.
Oh
And
my God,
I
that's
looked at him and
scary.
I said, Nick, I've never been on a motor scooter in my life, but I see the way people drive around this city, and I'm not sure
I
that I
don't.
want to be on a motor scooter.
No, no.
And he is like, he puts on a fake French accent. He's like, hey, Mac, where's your sense of adventure? So I'm like, peer pressure will get you everywhere with me. So I did it with, we both rented scooters, and we fueled up. We got the petrol, as they say, and we went all around Paris. Almost died a few times. But it was, certainly a memory I'll never forget. It was a lot of fun, to the point where we had Americans coming up to us, asking us, like, speaking English very slowly because they thought we were French, asking for directions to the metro. We kind of had fun just kind of playing along with that. But, it's a beautiful city, and I long to go back. Certainly
Yeah,
long
it
to go
is. There's something very magical about it. So every time I go back, and we do go. My husband and I go back. At least every couple of years, and I still have friends there, friends that I made even back in '64. I have a friend that's still around, and every time I go back, I just feel like, oh my God, I'm inside this jewel box. It's so beautiful, and all the activity that's going on. But it's hard to define it. It's just sort of magical how you feel when you're there. It's just, you know,
Yeah. It's beauty. It's a beautiful city with beautiful people and a great energy to it. I think
Mhm.
certainly a great energy to it. And thankfully, German is not the national language of France. So that's thank God we still have French. Joan, you mentioned earlier that I have a few questions that you were
Right.
prepared for me to ask you towards the end of our conversation. And I'm
Right.
curious, since somebody tipped you off or you did some homework, you might know what some of these questions are. But I always like to say one of the ways I like to get to know my guests is through some pop culture questions. So, Joan, I'm curious, when you were growing up, what were some of your favorite things to watch on TV?
Favorite things to watch on TV?
Yeah.
Oh, I Love Lucy was one.
Oh, the nothing the funny. I mean, pure comedy on that show. And
Yeah.
I believe, if I have my Lucy trivia correct, first show in U.S. Television history to show a toilet. I believe
To show what?
a toilet on screen.
Oh, probably. And also the first one to show someone pregnant.
Oh, that's right.
She
That's right.
was pregnant, and they were going to stop the show. And Desi said very, very rightly so. This is what life is. You can't do this. She's going to be this is way.
Right.
And she
You
was.
know, she
She
was
wasn't
pregnant,
hiding. Yeah, she wasn't hiding.
pregnant, not hiding it. Yet they still had twin beds in their bedroom.
Yes, that's probably true. But I liked the Man from Uncle. I think the Mary Tyler. Well, now this is getting a little older, but
That's okay.
the Mary Tyler Moore Show is one of my favorite shows because here she was a woman on her own, working on a TV station, right?
That's right. Yeah, you could probably
Yeah,
relate a little bit to that.
yeah. Make Room for Daddy. I used to like Danny Thomas.
Sure.
Him. It's funny. I like comedy, and
Yeah.
well, then of course, much earlier we would with my family we'd always watch the Ed Sullivan Show every week.
Yeah.
Saw the Beatles,
That would
for the
that would
first
have been
time.
cool. That would have been cool to see. What about now? Anything you care to watch now? Anything that catches your eye now?
Oh my God, there is so much good things on TV now. It's just really hard to say that you get caught up in streaming forever. And we've watched a lot of things. Right now, I am sort of hooked on a show that most people didn't know about, and I started watching it just almost because I was curious about one of the new member of royalty, sort of by marriage, Meghan Markle. Suits. I've been
Suits.
watching
Oh yeah, sure.
Suits, and it's clever and it's fun to watch, and it's about a lawyer's office, a bunch of lawyers, and it's very. So I guess each show is about 40 minutes long. So it starts out with an incredibly impossible case to win, and then somehow by the end of 40 minutes, after a lot of witty things and a lot of things that they're due to turn things around, of course they win the case.
Yeah,
So
and that's the
that's
one
fun.
where the lead isn't really a lawyer, but he's taken the
Yes,
bar and he's like he's
exactly.
brilliant,
Yeah,
but he's not
yeah,
a
yeah.
lawyer. Yeah.
That's
Um,
fun too.
very cool. Yeah, no, my twin brother's a lawyer. He watches that show, or he just finished watching that show, and he really
Yeah,
enjoyed it.
yeah.
What about
Yeah.
music? What did you like listening to? Kind of then and now.
Oh, no. It's really hard. Well, I don't, there were all those songs from the 50s and 60s. I remember when I was 14 years old, for the first time in my life, I went to a bowling alley or something. It's really bowling, and they had these jukeboxes. You could press the button and listen to something. And I pressed the button for Elvis Presley, and this was, when he was just starting out. And I will always remember hearing that. And I think it was the Lonely Hearts, on my way to the Lonely Hearts Hotel, something like that.
Hard
And I
pressed
said,
Hill?
yeah, that's right. I said, he's going to be big. And I
Well,
said
you
the same thing
predicted that one, Joan.
and I said the same thing about that when I saw East of Eden with James Dean,
Mm.
and no one had ever heard about James Dean before. And I said, this guy's going to be big. Of course, he was until he died a few years later. But
Yeah.
other than that, and so that's music. And I also loved Little Richard. I remember Little Richard starting out, and he was great to dance to. It was, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, all those, and I still listen to that. I love going back on the radio to the 70s. I love listening to
Oh,
the 70s.
it's so funny. I grew up listening to like really loud heavy metal rock and roll, like in my teenage years. And now I find myself driving around with Sirius XM 70s on 7, happier than I could ever be listening to like Gordon Lightfoot.
Yeah. It makes you happy listening to that music, doesn't it? Yeah.
It does, but I just wonder what happened to me. Like I used to listen to like really loud, aggressive music, and now I'm sitting here like hoping the Carpenters come on. But it's good. I love the 70s. I love the 70s. What about well, there's the hardest question I typically ask people is the one where if you could go back in time and whisper some words of advice into your younger self's ears, what would you tell the younger Joan?
The younger selves. Well,
Yeah.
First, I think looking back on my own youth, there were times that I really didn't believe in myself, and I should have. And so I would say that's the very first thing is believe in yourself. Don't let your parents tell you that you should not, do not this or that. And you want to listen to when they say good things, but you have to learn how not to, to be able to distinguish what's good and what's bad. And so that's one thing I think sometimes younger people are afraid to move ahead with what they are. They don't feel comfortable about themselves, or they look at some little imperfection in their body and they can't, they're afraid to do anything about it. And I say, you can't do it. I always remember the thing that Woody Allen said is on a scale of 1, we're saying on a scale of 1 to 10, models will also always say on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm a 1 because I got this little thing wrong and this little thing wrong, and it becomes a big thing. And actually, they're gorgeous, But Woody Allen gives himself a 10 because everything works, and that's all that's important.
Very good. Well, Joan, where can people buy Who Needs Paris?
Well, they tell me that if you go into any bookstore, it's either there or you can order it. And hopefully the more people that order it, then they'll start, ordering it themselves, I hope. And of course, Amazon.com is always there for you.
And Joan, if people want to, those are the two. All right. And if people wanted to,
any bookstore will, if they don't have it, they'll order it.
Yeah, there you go. And then if people want to connect with you, Joan, do you have a website or social media that you're active on?
I do. I have a website, which is my name, joanmeyerson.com. You just have to remember that Meyerson comes with an E, Meyerson. A lot of people get it mixed up with Bess Meyerson, who you may have heard in the past was Miss America. And her name, but she was spelled M-Y. So you don't want to do that. It's M-E-Y. And so there, you could actually, it's a fun website. It will tell you a little bit about Kate. I have the first chapter up there so people can read the first chapter. And there are a lot of photos of me in Paris. And then also there's some information just about me if you want to, read about my bio and other things pictures that I have, excuse me, from working on the Memorial Day concert. And and there's also a link that says contact me. And if you just, click on that link, you can write something with your own email address and it will come to me.
Very good. Well, Joan, I'll put all those links in our show notes so people can just easily tap to get to your website. And
Facebook too. People can, find me on Facebook.
All right.
And I've been doing Twitter. I've been trying to do Twitter and Instagram. I'm not so good at that, but Facebook.
Well, Twitter can be a rabbit hole.
Yes, especially now.
Yeah. Well, Joan, thank you so much for stopping by Uncorking a Story and letting me uncork yours.
Oh, it was a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks for listening to Uncorking a Story. If you'd like more information about today's guest or to find out more about Mike, go to uncorkingastory.com. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review us at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Tune in every week to hear Mike Carlin uncork a new story.